Gentlemen, those who have microphones, can you just test it to make sure that they're live and working?
Testing the stage left microphone.
This is not working yet.
Can you speak into it, Paul?
Hello? Okay.
It is working. Okay. Do we have an official? Can we start? Are we official? We are officially back. Welcome. Oh my goodness. We have cosmology on the stage with phase conjugate. We have Sapphire. We have an incredible team here. This is absolutely amazing. So thank you for returning. I'm glad no one got scared from any of the afternoon presentations. So the fact that everybody's back, this is wonderful. A question that I have is similar to the question that I asked yesterday. I'm always curious about the speakers that are hearing other speakers. And there's obviously similarities in some of these ideas and some of the things that you presented, but there's also some differences. And it doesn't mean that something is right or wrong, but I think one of the things that we've realized is, you know, as you go to, and I think Monty made this point, as you go and you have discovered something, it leads to more questions, right? And it's leading to ask further and further questions. So what I would ask the panel is, what did you have a charge around today? What was something that interested you? What is something that you have a question about that you'd like to ask each other?
Yeah, I have something I'd like to share with Monty and Michael. When I heard your presentation, now I have a background in cosmochemistry and in glaciology. And when you showed the picture of the sphere, a particle, that reminded me of a cosmic microsphere. And I was wondering if you considered that the cosmic microspheres that are coming down to Earth, maybe they could be created in the sun. It's an interesting idea. And very abundant elements in those are calcium and titanium.
That's not interesting.
Yeah. Have you ever checked the NASA archive of the cosmic dust and stuff?
Just responding to what you're saying. That is very interesting. So you said titanium and calcium?
Yeah, it's very common.
Because we're seeing that show up on all our samples.
So
we don't
maybe
know
you're
why it's
creating
titanium and
like what
calcium.
happens in the sun, and this is an evidence of that here on Earth, that these might be particles being generated in the sun. It would be interesting to find out what are their current theories about the origin of those.
Well, what we would say, I think, right now is that if we go back to the premise of the tests that we're running, which is really based on the electric universe, the electric sun model, when I talk to Wal Thornhill or Don Scott, they would say that those elements are being created in the sun's photosphere. Okay, that I know is what their claim is. And I don't know if that's an interesting question.
Yeah, also the tin. The work I did in the ice core work, there was one sample that had huge amounts of tin, which I've interpreted as both tin and lead. It was almost like 80%. It was incredible. Wow. And for a long time, I couldn't get the results published because they said, oh, well, that's contamination. They wouldn't believe it. But I finally figured out that these are superconducting particles that were in space, interstellar space. It had the ratio you find in interstellar space, not on Earth, the tin-lead ratio. And the tin had isotopic anomalies. And I was wondering if you can get enough of your tin to check what is its isotopic ratio, because of any of the elements, tin has the most isotopes. It's 10 isotopes. And I had very small amounts because it was from the ice core. So it was like 2 micrograms we analyzed. If you can get something of that sort, you could send it for analysis if you can find somebody doing that, if they're still doing tin, you know.
Yes, I would say that if we find it on the anode, EDAX is, and there's other more like higher resolution type of analysis that can be done, I would say that it would be fairly easy for us to identify what those isotopes are, I think.
Well, these fellows use mass spectrometry.
Right.
It's a difficult element to analyze because you have to vaporize it at just the right temperature so you don't get the contamination from the one of the isotopes of tin or indium can contaminate your results. So it's a trick to analyzing it.
I have a question. Thanks. I've got two questions. My understanding is that satellites have been around the sun, but not over the poles.
Yes.
And do you know?
There's one that went pretty far up. The Genesis went 20 degrees or 10 degrees. Right. So we've gone around it with one mission.
Is there any difference between what's going on at the poles and what's going on at the equator on the sun?
Difference in
structure, form?
Yeah, it was a pretty basic set of measuring devices, but it's a completely different sun when seen from above than the sides where we live.
Yeah, that is a supposition that was advanced to me at one time, that the poles may be actually a vortex formation at the poles. The other question I have is when we use a UV vis-IR spectrometer, we get the normal distribution of the sun, but we hear that there's hydrogen and helium on the sun. Why don't we get spectral lines? What is the explanation for not just getting pure spectral lines of hydrogen and helium when we point the spectrometer at the sun?
Yeah, well, this is a good way to get a bunch of people into a fist fight as soon as you start asking about the black body continuous spectrum versus the discrete gaseous or atomic spectrums. Do you want to get in that fist fight? No, should I go? Okay. So if you see very strong, very clear absorption lines from, say, hydrogen and helium, right? Meaning that light is shining through them. If light is behind them, it's shining through them, and we see it, right? So that's there. I don't know if that answers your question. We do see that. And then in some stars, it's the reverse. We actually see very bright, the lines of hydrogen. 656, 486, you see the star emitting very clearly in those. Okay. But I would say that the whole question of the photos, what's going on in the photosphere of a star and what you can learn from its spectra, the assumptions that are in every explanation need to be re-examined as we're trying to do and others are trying to do. A lot of assumptions about temperature, about density, about how plasmas behave. Yeah, so the questions become very difficult to answer unless you make a few assumptions, and then you can go to town.
Just a thought, you know, we've spent a huge amount of time talking about the physics of when plasma becomes, quote, self-aware, which we believe is related to recursion. I think it's wonderful that Thornhill's Plasma Universe group, it seems now the majority of those physicists believe in angels, actually. And I loved your comment when you said you became aware that the plasma would respond to you directly, and you were afraid to admit that to your investors, maybe. But I think that physics is instructive, that is to say, we have at Therify.net hundreds of healing practitioners dealing with the plasma cloud every day, and they're clear that plasma cloud builds up inertia over time, conditions of space, and then that plasma cloud needs to be treated like your pet puppy. In that if anyone comes in the room with a negative attitude, that plasma cloud is going to go away. And so understanding the aspects of what makes plasma self-aware is actually important physics, because every ancient religion obviously was a sun god religion, because whoever lives in that plasma is pretty mindful. So I wondered if even some experiments about the self-awareness in your plasma.
Okay, so I can speak to that. That was a conversation that you had and I had over dinner, but I didn't express here in the conference, because we like to talk about things that we know and experiments that we've documented and done. But what I will testify is that during phase 1 of the Sapphire project, when we were running a glass bell jar, what we know is that the E field would extend beyond the bell jar to quite a distance, maybe in some cases maybe 20 to 30 feet. And at one time we had trouble getting it ignited. But if I would walk up to the bell jar, just hold that for a second. And I showed our one physicist out of Los Alamos, I said, watch this. And, you know, Yana was there at the time. And I said, okay, I'll say it. abracadabra. And I went like that. I did not touch the jar. And we did this a number of times. And my E field that I have in myself would cause enough perturbation, for lack of a better scientific term for what might happen, to cause the plasma to ignite and then organize.
Come on, baby, light my fire.
So we did this a number of times. So right now it is not really, I would say, known why plasma will ignite. Now, we didn't go into this today, but Michael, in our previous presentation, talked about dark mode plasma. And it does have structure. Okay, can I say that? You gonna hit me?
I'll hit you soon.
Okay, he's gonna hit me soon. He's gonna hit me soon. He's gonna hit me. Okay.
Actually, no, there's no hitting.
No hitting? Not allowed?
You'll get in trouble.
Like his ear?
And then we have to do healing, and it's a whole to do.
So what we know is that there's the plasma can be under tension electrically, and that at certain times we don't know exactly why the plasma at that point in time, what will cause it to ignite, whether it's an interruption of the E field or something else. There you go.
And following on that, I would say that we've studied the theories of plasma igniting from dark mode to glow mode. We've studied them extensively, right? So it's not that we haven't looked at what's already described about it. We're just saying from our experience, the current descriptions are a little lacking in terms of the physics of what's going on.
Yes, exactly.
Well, we could program the right longitudinal to be compressional, and that defines ignition.
Well, so we would say to this. That's an interesting hypothesis. And so what we would do is say, okay, if we want to develop a test and an experiment to check what it is that you're saying, then we would do that. We would structure a test using
microwave longitudinal interferometry.
Okay. So we would develop a test using design of experiments methodology. I'm going to ask this question: how many here have heard of design of experiments? Okay, so not many. So Susan, you were saying about the standards of science and testing. So this is something that we could get into later, but
the design of the right experiment.
Well, that's one thing. It means, yeah, there's quite a bit to it.
One other thing, some years ago, I heard of some fellow who was doing something similar to you guys. We had a magnetic bottle creating fusion inside, and was even thinking of disposing of waste. Has a French-sounding name. I don't know if you've come across him.
DeGuise?
Huh?
DeGuise?
DeGuise? No.
I know he was doing. So yeah.
Somewhere in New Mexico, I think he was living at the time.
If you comb the literature, and as we heard today and yesterday, there's, and as we said in our presentation, transmutation and energy transformation at the nuclear level is a natural process that we are finding out is happening in a lot of places. Some would even say in chickens, right? They can make their eggs without being fed calcium, right? One. And so we're not saying that we've discovered some unique process. I think our strength is more we hope our ability to control the process, which has been a big part of our design and our effort is, yeah.
Okay, so I'll add my story here. Two things from today which I think really there were many things that struck me today. One, I'm glad I'm in good company with Tesla, who didn't understand electricity either. That was very nice to hear. Never felt comfortable with some of the things I was taught. The other thing is to do with some of the results that you presented today, which we talked about briefly, but Susan and I see a lot of inventors, many dozens of them, and they are talking about things that go far beyond the free energy aspects to their technology. They see a lot of extremely unusual things which they generally don't share with anybody. And when you build up the trust and you sit around the table, this is when they begin to share their stories. And one of the stories seems so relevant to what you presented today. And one story an inventor told us was, it wasn't a story, in fact, they'd done the experiments where they'd taken a lot of really nasty chemicals and they had put it in a very big vat, and then they processed those chemicals using their technology, using some type of frequencies. I'm not sure if they were using plasma, but the output of this was just hydrogen and water. And the inventor, who was quite a character, and sat down and sort of nuzzled up to me, and he said, "John, this is alchemy," which is a word I like a lot. He says, you must understand that the periodic table can all be derived from hydrogen. And of course, you know, I honestly couldn't comment either way, but I found it interesting. And when I see third-party engineering reports saying that this is possible, and that it opens the door to whether it's you know, nuclear waste remediation or a whole host of other things, you know, in very practical ways, that is wonderful. But it's more like, wow, I did not know that. So when I saw your work today, and I could never, you know, judge whether it was valid or not, but when I saw your work today, I thought, you guys have stumbled across the same thing. And we're really, really talking about something so fundamental here. And so I was really excited to see that. So, yeah, cool.
So here's a question. It's a comment and a bit of a question. When I think about, we talked about the youth yesterday. We seem to have no shortage of cool, interesting, deeply meaningful experiments in need of happening. I mean, that's the other thing that's come out of these last 2 days, and I think the audience can attest that, you know, there's great information that's been presented, there's great ideas. It certainly looks like, especially, you know, if we've paid attention to each other's presentations, we can continue to add to all of the work that we're doing, right? But I think about, well, what limits this from happening? What limits this? And, you know, part of it is money. That's a part of it, right? To be able to buy material, to be able to conduct experiments, to be able to have something be truly valid from an experimental design standpoint, right? So we don't seem to have a shortage of additional research in this arena, and a massive need from an application standpoint. And I think about, it was Paul who said that people have been shackled from what they've been taught about this closed system of physics. So it seems that this open system of physics is obviously a common language to us now in these last 2 days. I mean, for some of us it's been years, right? But it may be new for other people. So what can be done in order to further open up this research to people? What can be done? Because the youth does, and I'm not speaking for the youth, by the way, but you know, we hear they feel uncertain about their future. They feel like they're not connected into something that's meaningful, right? They're bored with what they're taught in high school, or they know it's bullshit, right? They know it's not, something's off, and that something being off is getting louder and louder and louder. And there's room for people to participate in this.
Yeah, well, the idea of open and closed system is easy to understand, and I think it's increasing, there's increasing awareness about this. To make the point that the standard physics that they teach in school is closed system view, and it's got a lot of flaws, like the Big Bang Theory is one example. And if they can open up to the alternative view that it's okay to see machines producing more energy than they use, that this is allowable when you are in an open system universe.
Mm-hmm. Toby?
When I woke up this morning, what came to my mind was that we're on the threshold of a dream, and that dream is free energy. And then I thought about that for a minute. That's a Moody Blues song, On the Threshold of a Dream, for all the boomers out there. And for the youth, I'd suggest, if you haven't heard it, to get a hold of that, because Bruce De Palma was on a threshold of a dream. But that was 2 generations ago now. And Tesla talked about it, and that's 5 generations ago. So the next thing that came to me is patience. And I addressed this in my talk. It's hard to make something happen before it's time. And so while we all strive for it, recognize that since the Greeks, people were trying to figure out how to fly. And it took a long time before that first flight. So while we maintain that vision, and it could happen at any minute, I think we have to relax into it, have patience, and study, and do our diligence, do our work. And those who are driven to explore these technologies will do it. And it will happen. But I want to emphasize to the youth that we have to have patience. When I was 30 years old and heard this great man, Tom Bearden, speak, I thought we were going to have it in 5 years, you know? Mm-hmm. And here we are, 39 years later, and we're still working on it. So it takes time.
For me, I went through the entire education system, the whole system, and then I went into professional engineering environment for many years without feeling inspired once. And it really wasn't until age 28, 29 when I first became inspired, and that was when I became familiar with this work, and something suddenly grabbed hold of my soul. I'm looking at the youth now, and we do work with our foundation to connect in with those at university. There's a young man in the audience here, Karsten Van Asdonk. We saw him do a video on YouTube where he spoke to his university lecturers and students about this technology. And he's 21? 24, sorry. And he said exactly what I would love to have said to my university lecturers and students, fellow students. And we were so deeply inspired. We've actually integrated a lot of that talk into a lot of the literature we create. So I have a massive amount of hope, and I just think, wow, gosh, and we have other people working with us as well in university who are just so inspired at this young age. And so I have this massive amount of hope that them being inspired at this young age, they don't have to wait until they're 30 or 40. You know, I've got no worries at all that we're in very capable hands.
I was really impressed when you started by saying, well, the turning point was your bliss experience. And, you know, if you're a plasma or electrical engineer and you'd like to know what that bliss experience was electrically, there are certain conditions like atmosphere, environment, time of day, nutrition, aura size, whatever. And my second book called Implosion, Secret Science of Ecstasy and Mortality for Conscious Kids was, the fact is to teach young people that they were correct to risk their lives to get sex, drugs, and rock and roll, I mean bliss, because in fact, access to bliss is the way you get to charge, to have an immune system, and to get a coherent enough aura to take something with you at death, actually. And so the physics of bliss process, which is a discipline for hygiene to how to accrete charge, what Christians call the quality of grace, is a great way to learn how zero-point energy works. Actually, charge implosion, literally. And so we started there by teaching young people the science of bliss, and that leads directly to the physics of zero-point energy. So I think that's a way in for young people. goldenmean.info/consciouskids, free PDF, that book.
Nice.
I was actually going to say that in my talk, but I didn't have time.
Great. I love your story. Did you see blue light?
Yeah, it was blue. Yeah. Same as this blue here. In fact, it's quite similar now I think about it.
One of the things that I recognize, and I'm sure some of you do as well, because you probably were brought here because of that, the public work, because it's not easy to do public work. I mean, as I was saying to the BEM guys when we were in the process of beginning to promote, and I'm going to share this little story, I said, you know, they're like, well, we're not getting the speakers to do their videos because each speaker was supposed to record a video for the conference, right? And I'm thinking, well, I know how I feel putting a camera on myself and speaking into it. I mean, it took me 6 hours to do that because speaking in front of a camera, if you're speaking to a person, it's different, right? But when you're having to put a camera on yourself and then, you know, beam that out, it's an uncomfortable feeling. And I say that because a lot of scientists, a lot of engineers, they're more introverted by nature, right? They just keep it more contained, keep it more in. But to be able to be expressive, to put yourself out there, right? It's not an easy thing. And this is something that everybody on this panel has done to move through that, you know, uncomfortableness, right? To be able to share the knowledge, to share the information, and you've been doing it for a long time, and you continue to do that. To be Sapphire, to be an independent research organization. I mean, I don't know if you technically call yourselves citizen science, but you are sharing as much as you can with the public, which is really cool, which is not something that most people get access to. So I just want to acknowledge that because I think the rate of information that's now being shared, the bliss, even getting bliss from a YouTube video as someone's giving a talk, right? Like, the ideas, the epiphanies are going off, right? So thank you for doing that because it's not easy, it's not comfortable, and you have to learn how to do technical things, right? With the videos and everything else. So, you know, it's uncomfortable and you're dealing with the public, which can sometimes not be a fun thing, but it makes a difference, and I just want to acknowledge that.
And then you can be a perfectly shareable wave.
What does that look like, Dan? What's the...
Perfected charge distribution. It's fractal.
I knew he would be able to answer that. Okay, perfect. If you're okay... Oh, actually, Monty wants to answer, and then we're going to go to the audience to do a Q&A. Yeah.
Well, when it comes to the point about being in front of a video camera, it started in 2012 with Ben Gedlow. And he was contracted to document the Sapphire project. And you get over your fear of a camera when you have a filmmaker living at your house for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months of the year, and you're getting down in your pajamas and you're walking down to your computer and you're wanting to have a coffee, and you turn around and there's this camera in your face. So what happened with me personally is it's about opening up and being vulnerable to the things I don't know. And I have, Tracy and I have 11 grandkids. And my grandsons are now just getting old enough where they're starting to really engage Grandpa. And this Thanksgiving, Gabriel had, he's 11 years old, and he had joined Grandpa to the sportsman show, and then we went to the laboratory afterwards, where Grandpa makes the sun. And about a year later, and this Thanksgiving, I had the most engaging conversation with my grandson, who hasn't learned that he's not supposed to ask questions yet. Now, I'm pretty sure with the education and with other things, he's going to learn fairly soon that he shouldn't ask certain types of questions because, well, that's going to get him into trouble. But with Grandpa, you see, he can ask Grandpa how do magnets work, and Grandpa's going to say, I don't know. Or we take a fluorescent light bulb and we get it really close, and I tell him to hold on to it, and we bring it up to a plasma wall, and it lights up on its own. He's not touching it. And we just think that's fascinating. So what I'm learning is that with the Sapphire team, I think you're going to find, if some of you got to know us, that we're actually becoming more like our 11-year-old grandson and learning to ask the questions and not be afraid to ask the questions and not be intimidated by those who try to, because we don't know, and we don't, not be intimidated by the people who say they think they do know and try to lord it over us and try to do some sort of intimidation thing. And so we just have a great conversation because Grandpa doesn't know, and we just talk about all kinds of things. I have less problems with my grandson than I do with most adults, you see, because most adults have, I think, have been trained not to explore. But when we're children, that's what we do. We play, we explore, and if we lose that, I think we've lost our souls, personally. I think it's not a healthy thing. So I just want to get that out. So I think that for us to encourage, like from the Sapphire team, you know, we're older guys getting to play with really cool toys, as you can see, and we have a lot of fun. Most of the time. I mean, sometimes there's yelling and screaming, and well, we've learned colloquialisms, like 4-letter words that get yelled across the lab when, you know, the hydrogen count's getting too high in the exhaust system beyond the safety measure, which is not a good idea because, you know, you can blow up the lab, right? So sometimes that happens. But in any case, I just want to get that out. I don't know if that addresses.
Oh no, it's good. It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sharing is good.
Yeah.
And just to add to that, there's a little story of my son Jack, who's 8, and this goes back to thinking about the youth and the young. And I always ask them challenging questions, and I try not to brainwash them, even with what I think is the truth. And I'll just throw out questions. And I was in the car one day, and I said, Jack, how does the sun work? And then I just let him do whatever. And he just said to me, he was in the back seat, and he just said, Daddy, I was shown how the sun works. And I said, oh, cool. And he goes, the sun is powered by invisible streams of energy that you can't see. And I was like, what? And I swear, I never taught him the electric universe theory or anything. And I said, how did you know that? And I said, I don't know what the truth is. And he says, well, I was shown that. I was shown that in the darkness. And, you know, I was like, wow. And so, you know, it's a little story to show that there are some really amazing things that are going on with the children who are coming in. And yet again, I have no worries at all that this will all come to fruition.
Mm. That is a great story, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. So we're going to start our Q&A, and I need one mic. Actually, I will leave you that one since you're in the middle. I will take yours, Monty.
Yes.
All right. And I'm going to walk around because I will do this today as opposed to having pointing. So who would like to raise your hand if you have questions? Okay. We're going to go to you first since you're closest to me.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Stephen. This question is mostly for John, but if anyone else wants to answer, feel free. I'm quite impressed by what you presented and the phases you guys have been going through and how far you've come with going to actual production manufacturing. Could you please share your imagination or your vision of the actual breakthrough moment? You know, the moment that something that is series produced or even mass produced is on the market and that COP higher than 1 is like a new reality. What will that look like in the media landscape and everything?
Wow, I think it may well already be with us. I think we might just see it as a steady sort of reduction in energy cost. We've had conversations today about people potentially using these technologies within power purchase agreements and things where you can integrate the technology into the system without making too much of a big impact. However, eventually, you know, that trend is going to take us somewhere, and there's some real, there's going to be some fundamental changes. The cost of building materials are going to drop to 0. The cost of desalination drops to 0. Cost of reforestation of deserts drops to 0. It's going to have a really quite profound impact on all of us. It might take some time. Whether there's going to be a big revolutionary breakthrough or slowly, I don't know. But it's going to have some profound impacts.
Can I follow up to that? Because we've talked about this with the organization. What about the creativity factor? The vast majority of the inventors, we know that there's multiple devices that they're working on, and they always say the same thing, that their goal is to not just to get out the basic one, but then to do what afterwards?
I feel like I should have an answer to that question.
Well, that's okay. What we find, is this okay if I'm sitting here, you guys? What we find is most of the inventors have multiple devices that they are working on, but there's stages and phases. And they'll get to, quote unquote, the more cool devices. Many of them have ideas for anti-gravity technology. Right. So that's what I was referring to. Can you just speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. They are holding back on some of the best things. And again, these are the cozy chats we have late into the evening, where I'll be taken off to a room and shown the stuff they didn't show me earlier. And I've seen some really profound things. And generally, we're at the stage one of trying to do something with the energy. But what will follow on as a result of that is profound in terms of, and I wish I could share, but there's some very interesting anti-gravity things that we've seen, and some very interesting thing with health technologies and the growth of plants, particularly. Really amazing, really well done science that I've personally been involved with. So there's all sorts of implications for this technology that go far beyond just energy.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, Bob Grenier, volunteer with the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. Thank you to all of the speakers. Some of you I've really wanted to meet for a long time, and forgive me, my people who I've worked with would be more interested in the right side of the table, so I need to address my questions to that. The first one is a very simple question to Michael Clarage and Montgomery Childs. What made the sun positive?
Great question. So when I was doing my evaluation of the electric universe, I came across Crookes' work where he had rubies in a plasma discharge. And that's where he started coining the phrase radiant matter. But the rubies themselves weren't part of the electric circuit. So what we've discovered is that certain elements under certain configurations, they will not rise or fall to the electric potential around them. So all you need really is the delta. The delta meaning if you've got a negatively charged environment, you've got elements that will not drop to that or climb to the voltage range, you're going to have a plasma discharge. So interestingly, rubies will give you radiant matter, even though it's aluminum oxide, but the probes that we use in the chamber, which are made out of aluminum oxide, will not. So there's something special about the rubies. And that's really all I can say. I don't think you need to have it positively charged in that context, just that it's positive relative to its environment.
The other thing is from our research, based on what we might guess is in your reactor, maybe hydrogen isotopes, which you talked about, and a steel core. You said that you almost always see, in response to a previous question, titanium and calcium. And I would suggest that with any sample, you can look for anomalies in 46, 48, and 50 on titanium, and 46 and 48 on calcium. And then you separate it from the contamination to the potential synthesis. That's one thing. The other thing is that the observation that you saw on your anode is a similar, almost exact observation, and it's very well described by Takaaki Matsumoto, who was a Japanese nuclear research scientist in Sapporo, Japan, and he published and characterized the crystal grain destruction by atomic hydrogen clusters in various lenr systems between 1990 and 1994 in fusion technology, and saw similar reaction products, and concluded ultimately that it was exotic vacuum objects that did the job.
That it was what, sorry?
That it was exotic vacuum objects that did the job.
Exotic vacuum objects. Yeah,
and Hal Puthoff would be able to talk to
Sorry?
Hal Puthoff, your advisor, would know what that was.
Oh, okay. Okay, so you're giving me an explanation as to why we see these particular anomalies.
I'm saying that there are about 6 papers published by Takaaki Matsumoto between 1990 and 1994. And they talk about what you saw in your micrographs and presented today. The EVOs start eating the crystal grains from the impedance change at the crystal grain boundary, and they start eating the crystal grains in and transmute the matter into gases and the elements that you observe.
Okay, that's interesting. Did he see any thermal anomalies when this happened?
Well, he was doing very simple experiments. Yes, they looked like being, but really thermal anomalies are to a nuclear radiation expert, he's looking for things on nuclear emulsions and transmutations. Really, that's what he's interested in. That's what he details.
So he just wasn't looking for any thermal response at all.
He wasn't trying to generate a heat generator.
Well, we weren't either. We were just trying to, maintain the plasma.
Yeah.
So we, but it was something that we had to shut down when these reactions started to happen. Okay, well, this is good. Can you do me a favor?
Yeah.
And that is grab me right after the conference, because I would like to connect with you, and I'll give you my business card, and maybe we can investigate these things.
So there's many points. We'll talk then. One for John Cliss, if I may take the liberty.
That's okay.
You have set up this year a community interest company. The Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project was set up in 2012 as a community interest company. And it is a design, I don't know if you know of it, it's somewhere between a charity and a normal corporation. It pays normal corporation tax, but it has to reinvest almost all of the rest of the money that it gets into the purpose of the organization, which is research in our case, is research in your case. The thing is that if you want to really be able to deliver to your potential inventors and connect investors to inventors, you have mentioned the two things that we've grappled with throughout our existence. Do you take money on, which the company structure allows, and do you consider IP? Every single time that we've considered those two questions, it's immediately got to the point of we can't do either, because we would be compromised in the eyes of the inventor. And secondly, there's the thing called the velocity of money, and there's the thing called the velocity of ideas, in my view. Velocity of money is how economics works. You can pay 1 million bills with $1,000 if someone pays the bill without waiting 3 months. And in that 3 months, you can pay unimaginable numbers of bills. If you hold back by putting something in an IP and spending 3 years to make the IP, that never gets out into the world. And even when it is protected, it's then not in a way that everyone can use, because they're going to try and find a way around it and maybe fail. So really consider, do you want to be controlled by someone who invested in you? And do you want to have a situation where the IP loses its velocity of information? You might think about it. So could you speak to that?
Yeah, I'd love to. First of all, I'll preface, after this conference, Susan and I will be having a strategy week with many ethical investors who we've built up relationships with and have got extensive experience in international business, who are going to be helping us to develop a strategy. And that includes lawyers and IP lawyers, again, who are friendly. And so we got some big roundtable discussions with the inventor team as well, who are going to be flying in, and we're all going to get around and knock our heads together. So there's a strategy on its way. However, specifically, yeah, we've grappled with this as well. What's the best structure? We've made a start with a community interest company. We took some advice even just a few days ago that we might want to set it up as a trust, maybe offshore. There's all sorts of different options, and that's going to be some of the things we're going to explore. Philosophically, around IP, it's different for each inventor group, but none of them want to patent. They want to get it out first to market as quickly as they can, because they know the realities of going through the patent route, which is great, wonderful. I personally would have no interest in going through the patent route, because I don't think that's the game we're in. The wider point of that is, as I mentioned earlier, I've been a follower and student of Rudolf Steiner for many years, and he talked once about, he did a series of lectures on economics, and he described how ideas are inspiration. What we call intellectual property are inspiration, which he says came from somewhere, and it came to the inventor as a gift, and a gift that should be shared with all. And he said that what happens in our world, and he was talking specifically about how we manage ideas as patents and intellectual property. He said what happens is the idea comes into the inventor and it gets stuck, and energetically gets stuck and can stay stuck forever sometimes. And we know inventors who have died who were never able to release their idea. I mean, I get it, all right? I understand the need to try and monetize it. However, What he says was we should, this is very difficult for inventors, I understand, being an inventor myself, but if we can keep that channel clear, that we create room for more ideas to come in. So if we can take the idea, flow it through the market as quickly as we can using all our connections and networks and just know that it's going to be copied and ripped off and being totally happy with that, then we create the new space for the next thing and the next thing. And then it becomes an unstoppable flow. So that's, I think, the way I'd like to see it come. There we go, yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
So coming out of a commercial world, so here's the deal. So we have $15 million wrapped up in Sapphire right now. And we have shareholders. And we want to get out into production. And then we need to get investment. Now, let's say you have $15 million or $9 million that we're looking for right now. And you want to put it into our company. And you see that, well, we need to get this into production. And we need to get a return on investment because there's millions of dollars that's gone into this, and we need to get that back so we can make a profit and, well, pay the bills, right? But we just you gave me the $9 million, and I just said, you know, I want to be a really good guy, and I'm just going to give the rest of the world our technology for free. What would you say to me? Would you still give me the $9 million, or would you say, you know, I'm not sure if that's a really good investment or if there's any kind of return on that investment right now or not? So the bottom line is that it sounds really great, and we'd love to share everything that we're doing with Sapphire with you, and we've told you as much as we can right now, and we're being straight up with you. There's certain things that we're not telling you, and the reason is because, well, we have vested interest. We have to pay our own bills. Well, how do you do that? This is the world that we live in. This is flesh and blood, and I've got gas and rent and all the wonderful things. So do you want me to give our technology away right now? Do you think that would be wise or no? So how do you make that work?
Okay, yeah, I think all I'd add is I'm not necessarily talking about you just go open source to everything. I mean, I can think in the case of this inventor team, we've got something which there's in our case, a relatively short time scale to go from prototype to manufacturing. So we would work with manufacturing teams to put it together, put it in a product, preferably do it as quiet as possible, whether through PPAs, start earning the money and just hopefully get a 2-3 year head start. So I think it depends on the type of technology. I mean, with you guys, you've taken investment. It's going to take probably a while to turn it into a product. So it might be different, but...
This is a good conversation. So coming out of the automotive industry, I worked for a company, Magna International, who employs many, many, many people, profitable. So here's the deal. They would come to us, Honda or Toyota or someone else, and say, look, we've got this problem. We'd develop a product for them. We'd retain the IP. We'd produce the product, and we'd have licensing rights, and that they would get it out to market. Other companies would just steal the technology. So there's a large cost into getting to manufacturing. Okay, maybe not with this particular product, but if you're going to say, let's make a Sapphire reactor, what are your overhead costs? Probably a number of millions of dollars to start producing reactors. And you've got to pay the bank back because you just borrowed money. How do you get that ROI when somebody just ripped you off your technology? And this is exactly what the problem is when we ran into it with the Chinese. They're the most obvious these days. Let's pick on them. They're easy. So they rip off technology, and you see it out in the market, and your overhead here in Europe is going to be higher than what theirs is, because I've been to China. So 10 cents an hour, it's not difficult to compete. So how do you deal with that in that context? You can't just race to get to the market. You have to be able to find a way to protect your market enough that you can get return on that investment and pay your bills and the employees. That's just what's going on right now.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, we're exploring the idea here. Okay. I'm not saying this is definitely what we're going to do. This mind's much greater than mine working to create a strategy for this. And perhaps it is, you know, it feels idealistic in some ways. But, you know, I come at this, and again, this is idealistic, but I do come at this, that this technology just has to get out one way or the other. And I don't know what the answer is, whether it's some hybrid solution or something. But the conversation needs to be had, a complete strategy on this. This is so important.
Yes, I would really agree with that. Big time.
Okay, you can come back. All right.
Can I just suggest a middle ground, where is you use, for instance, in the US, which genuinely, in our experience, it is by far the biggest market interested in supporting these type of technologies. I saw it in the guy that raised 700 million on an idea of a device in yesterday's presentation. I forget who it was, sorry. You can do a provisional patent on an aspect of your technology, which will give you a year or so of protection. Mm-hmm. And then you can maybe share that information or license it on the basis of the provisional patent with no intention to actually deliver it. And you wrap people up that are going to be wanting your technology on the basis of the provisional patent because they get to see the technology a year earlier. There's ways of thinking about this that allow you a middle ground and still allow you, really, it's licensing. You want to get to a point of licensing as fast as possible to try and come around this kind of IP problem.
That's a really interesting question, because we have a number of provisional patents right now that we're processing. And it gives us a year to pull them together, bring them to maturity so that you can obtain a patent. That's a really...
You can keep them on the boil for a little while as well.
I got you.
And you may not ever get the patent, but you could start signing up licensees before you get...
I got it, okay, okay. Well, thank you. You want a commission on that? Yeah, not bad. I like it, you know, this is good.
But we've got another question here, unless, Michael, you want to add on to that, or are we good? Okay, so we have a question right here.
Yeah, well, it's more a contribution to the business discussion in this case. More or less than 10 years ago, I make for a big company, I make a Sarban-Oxley project, yeah? And then I work very closely with controllers, yeah? And it was PVC. And then I learned that there must be trust from investors to companies. And that means they need control. They want to have what John is doing on something like they want a level of trust. Yeah? And this is also with the IFR, I don't know what it's controlling rules in Germany. We have the same here in Europe, yeah? And also GDPR. It's something like data protection, etc. It's all methods of control, of having control, yeah? About financial money flows in a firm, and that produces something like trust. Yeah? And when we are talking about is why is it so difficult to get money for something like research? Yeah? I learned that companies do not afraid about spending money in research if they have their own research and development department, because they know they work for them, yeah? And they want to build up the strategic gap where they know that new products are coming, and new products normally came out of new physical effects, yeah? But the physical effect first, from the first prototype to the 0 series, etc., that means a lot of time, 5 years, something else. And that must be financed, and you must protect that intellectual property, but not only in the product, but also in the process to build up the product, and also to the reliability of the product. Normally, the customer do not want to buy the product. He wants to buy the value, what comes out of the product. It's something like you do not buy a car, you buy mobility. Yeah? You do not buy a telephone, a cell phone, you buy connectivity and or something else. And that is the reason why most of the people who are not in this business, yeah, do not have any clue how to handle it. They just want to have the value, and they want a specialist that take care of it, yeah, and deliver such a value, but reliable. And this is why every investor, he wants to make something like have an out seeing in the future that when he invests in such property, in such R&D, that they come out on the long range, they can be sure that they can participate. Yeah? And there's something what you do with your firm, with the NOD, you say? You can spell it. That you know something like, or similar to a controlling group, yeah, for R&D. Something like TÜV in Germany does, yeah? TÜV Rheinland and other stuff. It's technical controlling, and this is something like trust. And I hear here in these discussions always is also from the Gaia, if you have a product, then it's no problem to bring it to market. But I think this is not the truth. If you have a prototype, bring it to market, it's much more complicated than scientists thinking. Yeah? Because when you're working in engineering, it's much more complicated to bring out the value for the people and take care of everything what is difficult with the product. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Does anybody want to comment on that? And just to give so the speakers know from a timing standpoint, we have about 8 minutes left.
Yeah,
and we want to take one more question from the audience.
What comes to my mind is we're a product of our age, the age that we're in, because nobody was around to patent control of fire. It was shared equally. So there was no intellectual property. And when the wheel came along, there were no lawyers or investors standing up to make money off of that particular invention. So here we are in the industrial age, and everything that just got talked about is a conundrum, one of the things that we have to solve and work through, and there are no easy answers to it. I have seen and been with several inventors that got their invention from a dream or a sudden inspiration, a vision that they had. And the problem with this age is that we don't understand that we are not these bodies. And that universal knowledge that just came through us, we were just the vessel for that knowledge to come through. And it came from Source, and we're all part of Source, so it's all of ours. But we're stuck in this industrial age, and I'll just leave it at that. It's part of this conundrum that we have to work through on how do we get this technology manifested considering the system that we're in. And then, go ahead, next question.
Sorry, just one comment. We're working with a manufacturer who I would say is an enlightened manufacturer. He practices helping his competitors. He will go into his competitors' businesses who are failing, and he will help them just because. He's gifting his knowledge to all those around, and it comes back in abundance. He doesn't do it because to get any gain. It is this beautiful, enlightened way. And amazing things happen when you gift like this. He is going to be part of this strategy we're putting together, where he will be the initial person involved in the manufacturing using several of his companies. And they're going to be generating IP through the manufacturing processes themselves. And what he will be doing is creating a team who will then go to any other organizations who have a license or whatever on this technology, and he will teach them everything, and he will give that away as well. And it's that kind of gifting, I think, which is part of this new way. So we'll see how that goes, but it's cool.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I am that I am. I am lucky of free and sovereign domain. And I know who I am. Freedom and sovereignty comes from within, not from without. So I'm so happy to participate in this blessed event. And I have no questions. I have some comments. I'm delighted with your experimental results. You have delivered wonderful proofs that official scientific atom model is wrong. Elements of matter are not that what is believed in science. They are different pressure conditions. And that is what you have created in your reactor and measured elements there. They were not there before. That's what you have done. But you don't need to trust me and believe me. There is knowledge which is shared in immortal works of the Walter Russell, who is the most important incarnation of all times because he brought the knowledge. And you can find answers to all of your questions, not only you, but all of you, in the universal one, the secret of light, and the atomic suicide. It is available. Atom is consisting of rings of light spinning around the centering mind, spirit, creator, God point, which is centering that. And every element of matter is a different pressure conditions. And that is the basis of transmutation. You have done it wonderfully. And you will confirm, and I'm waiting for publication of your result as a proof also of my atom model that I proved and published recently. Yeah, I call it atom because the God creator is atom, it is his model. So my beautiful sisters and brothers, we all have the same Father God. That is why we are brothers and sisters, and knowledge is available there by Walter Russell. I wish you all the best, and I bless you with my light.
Thank you. Nice job.
Yeah, and I would second all of what this gentleman has just said. And as I said during my talk, it's real easy to remember. Philosophy.org is where you can find all of the Walter Russell material, all the books, and the pressure conditions, I think, is really what's going on. So I've got to get that. I'll send you guys emails on that.
Yeah. I see now, with the number of people I've been talking to the last couple of days, I think my inbox is going to get filled up really fast. So be patient with us as we get back to you. But if you want to contact us, I guess get a hold of the GlobalBEM if you have things that you want to contribute, and we will endeavor to get back to you. Thank you very much for your comments. Okay, I promised somebody that I would not use this podium for anything other than science. But if you want to have another discussion afterwards, I can share a scotch, and then we can have some interesting discussions. Okay?
Any last words from the panel before I wrap up? Or do you feel complete?
I want to thank you. Good job.
Thank you.
If I told you I've never hosted a conference before, that's the truth. So my love for this, Dr. Peter Lindemann said to me probably halfway through Saturday, he said, "Susan, you didn't introduce yourself." And I thought, oh, I need to do that, right? My love for this, and I'll share a little bit of a personal story. There's some information, I've done some interviews about why I'm in this arena. Why did I choose to do this? I feel like I literally came here on this planet to help move this forward. At a very young age, I had a knowing of what I was here to do, and to provide real, what I call real science, to provide and to find those people. As I got older, I started to really understand, what I'm really here for at this time, to provide space and to support those people that were here doing it in the most honorable, ethical, truthful way. And I feel like we've achieved some significant movement this weekend with that. So thank you all for showing up. Thank you for those of you who've joined the live stream, because it's truly been a pleasure for me to get through some nerves and anxiety to figure out how to do this the right way. But my love for this work, my love for releasing people beyond their limitations, because the universe is abundant energy. It is divine, right? It is that divinity. And we know that there's a more rightful way that we're supposed to be able to live and breathe and be on this plane of existence. And that's why I do it. And thank you so, so much.